So I was actually hoping to be able to break down the movie What's Right with America over this weekend, but apparently some things are coming up that they kind of take precedence. So I had the unfortunateness of having to watch this.
We actually still have a law on the books called the Communist Control Act.
Go on.
Even naturalized U.S. citizens, if they are communists, if they carry out communist political activity, they can be denaturalized and deported on those grounds. And so the president should invoke the Communist Control Act and just denaturalize him, send him back to Uganda, and then it's over. Right?
Yeah.
Like that really is what should happen. Not just with him, but like all his voters. And that's probably the next place that the Overton window is going to necessarily have to shift.
So this man wants to deport a democratically elected mayor because of the fact that he is, according to this man, communist. Now, before we go further, because people don't understand the differences between socialism and communism, as it is clear with this gentleman, we're going to go over the differences. So, communism. Private property is ultimately commonly owned. There is no private property. Markets. It's a classical end state, largely replacing capitalist markets. So, yeah, no private businesses. Government goes off the Marxist theory, ultimately envisioning a stateless society. So, eventually, there would be no government. In fact, no country has ever actually become truly Marxist. Political system. Communism is an economic or social theory. Historically, communist states were generally one-party states. So you take the communist China, how it's a one-party state. Yeah, that's that's communism. Not Mamdani being a Democrat. Goals. A classless society without private ownership of the means of production. Essentially, we're talking about a stateless, classless, moneyless society. Now, socialism. Private property can permit substantial private property or business. In fact, many socialist countries have private property and private businesses. Markets. Socialism coexists with private markets. Government usually plays a major economic role. So they're making sure that, people can afford things when necessary. And oftentimes that does mean taxing everybody to be able to provide some of these resources. The political system can be democratic or multi party. And the goal, a greater social public control of the economy and distribution. Before we go further, I do want to point out that I am not a communist, nor am I a socialist. I am a pragmatic libertarian, and I look at what other countries have done to see what works and what doesn't work, as well as I look to come up with new ideas or to see where we might have gone wrong in the past. But if you do want an example of communism in the United States today, the closest thing you will find is actually Return to the Land, which is a far right group of that restricts their societies only to white European descent. So, now that you understand the difference between socialism and communism, we can see that Mamdani is not a communist. However, I did look into the Communist Control Act because I will admit I was unaware of this act. Fun fact, because it's so old, it's scanned into Congress's library. It's not actually just a text. It's actually scanned in. Now, I will admit that I was unaware of the Communist Control Act of 1954 until I saw this video. And so I did the responsible thing and actually looked into it, which is one thing that a lot of people will not do. And they really should. But nowhere in it does it actually allow for the deportation of a naturalized citizen. It does not allow for the denaturalization of a naturalized citizen. Neither does the Internal Securities Act, which is mentioned as well inside of the Communist Control Act of 1954. So Whereas the Internal Security Act does talk about deporting aliens. But these are things that are trying to be pushed because they want to push fear on you. They are trying to push fear over facts. They are trying to push feelings over facts. You should not fall for these. In fact, they are trying to make you fear Muslims because they want you to hate Muslims. The same thing is happening with the person that's running as a Democrat in my state. The state that I vote in, we have a Muslim running for Senate. And yeah, they are trying to do the Muslim scare on him too, or for him too. I've also witnessed it all over social media. The cries that they're going to enforce Sharia law. We have a First Amendment that protects against that. If somebody tries to invoke against the First Amendment, we have a Second Amendment to protect it. I have watched videos of husbands beating their wives under Muslim religion because in other countries that is allowed. And I want to set myself clear here. I want people to know this, in case, especially if you have a spouse that has said that they can harm you or abuse you, or you're a child who has been told that your parents can harm you or abuse you for religious reasons. That is illegal in the United States. There is no religious exemption. I checked. Now, what is one valid reason as to why you shouldn't fear them in the first place? Because I understand that some things that they might do in other countries might sound scary, and you might fear them trying to bring them into the United States. Well, you see the very first part of my brand, God's Little Libertarian? I want to remind you of Psalms 23:4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff. They comfort me. I don't have a reason to fear. Have I feared in the past? Yes, I am human. Have I feared in the recent past? Yes. Yes, I have. Sometimes I have to be reminded about that. My grandmother reminded me about that a couple of months ago. But, yeah, you have nothing to fear. They are trying to push fear onto you to make you do things that are irrational and against the Civil Rights Act, that are irrational and are not American, and that are incredibly radical. The same thing happened in the past. But no, you cannot deport Mamdani under the Communist Control Act. And the fact that you found that funny is very sickening. So, anyways, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Here's to a new week, and yeah, stay free. By the way, I have considered just going back to blogging instead of vlogging due to the fact that, I have a very monotone voice. I admit that. I admit that I can't be very entertaining. I'm more of a Paul Harrell than a Demolition Ranch. But yeah, if you guys can let me know in the comment section, that would be wonderful.